We recently were fortunate enough to get another instant classic from the big guy. This time, the
This
subject is guns. We
oh, this wasn't him saying "God bless the Queen."
we had it a little bit earlier in the week. We'll refresh your recollection because you can never hear the classics enough. Joe Biden on his accomplishments in the area of gun control, making your community and mine safer in the process, of course.
It made it harder for people to buy stabilized braces. Put a pistol on a brace, it turns into a gun. Makes it more, you can have a higher caliber weapon, a higher caliber bullet coming out of that gun.
Wait, a bracelet or brace? What was he?
A brace turns a pistol into a gun and changes the caliber of that gun. Some magical, those braces. For more on this topic, public safety continues to be a dominant political issue. John Lott joins us, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and stats at the DOJ's Office of Legal Policy, author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's great to talk to you again. Thanks for having me on.
Another case study in politicians who love to talk about the things they're doing to restrict access to guns, though they know nothing about the guns they're restricting access to.
Right. Well, I mean, at least I learned one thing from him. I learned that adding a stabilizing brace onto a handgun turns it into a gun.
Yes. Yes, and you can change the caliber of the
magic.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
But,
so the arguments from the left persist. We of course get them in Chicago, as you well know. The real problem here has nothing to do with the state's attorney's office, has nothing to do with the mayor's office and the mayor's direction of the police department. It has everything to do with these lawless red states like Indiana that allow bad people to bring guns into Chicago. It has to do with the NRA. It has to do with our cowboy culture on the right, where we're trying to get a gun in every toddler's hand and so on and so forth. These are the arguments that persist. And oh, by the way, don't you know, for all the talk about big cities, red states have higher violent crime rates than blue ones, John.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, on the last point, it kind of started earlier this year when Governor Gavin Newsom made the claim that the murder rate for 2020 were higher in the states that voted for Trump than for the ones that voted for Biden. You know, it's kind of funny. They had data for 2021 when they were making the statements. They seem to not notice that actually in 2021 the reverse was true. The murder rates were higher in the Biden states than they were in the Trump states, but nobody in the media fact checks seem to bother to look at that. But beyond that, the issue is why not realize that dealing with crime is generally a local issue. All the points that you're just making, policing decisions are made locally. District attorneys across virtually all the country are elected locally. Judges in the vast majority of the country are elected locally. So when you've had the types of things that you're talking about, where local judges have been releasing large numbers of inmates from jails, or district attorneys like Kim Foxx, where you are, is refusing to prosecute many violent criminals, or in 2020, Chicago cutting the number of police officers by 400 positions. Those things, it's not rocket science why those things are related to increased crime. And so one thing to look at is to look at the county levels. And what you find is that the counties that voted for Biden have a much higher murder rate than the counties that voted for Trump. And more importantly, if you break it down, the reason why the states, even in 2020, if you ignore the 2021 data, but in 2020, the states that voted for Trump had a higher murder rate, not because of the Trump counties in 2020, But in those states that voted for Trump, they had a much higher murder rate in the Biden counties. That's the difference. The counties that voted for Biden.
Right, of course. I mean, Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis isn't a red state. Is going to drive a higher overall murder rate in Tennessee than, say, Vermont has, with a homogenous and older population. I mean, this isn't that complicated, is it?
I don't think so. But for some reason, they're unwilling to kind of look at breaking down the data that way.
So Forbes headline that said red states have higher gun death rates than blue states obviously was misleading information.
Right. Well, again, look, when everybody's making these comments about the murder rates in 2020, the data for 2021 was already out. You would think when they're putting that stuff together, they would look to see what the murder rates were in the red and blue states in 2021 when they had the data. But, as I say, you'd want to go and break it down at a lower level because, states will pass things like what the penalty will be for certain types of crimes, but whether the people are arrested, whether they're actually sentenced to those penalties is a local decision, as I'm sure people in Illinois realize that that's the fact, that it's, the city of Chicago determines the number of police officers that are hired. They determine what judges are going to be elected. And it makes a big difference. That's where you determine whether it's risky and costly for criminals to be sentenced and caught and convicted.
And do you feel like, as long as you've been doing this work, do you feel like you're just forever rinsing and repeating the same responses to the same tired arguments with updated data that proves out the same things that you were just detailing? Do you get the sense that we've made any progress sort of nationally in our understanding of this issue? We made a lot of progress with respect to individual 2A rights, thanks to Supreme Court decisions. But in terms of like the general cultural understanding of the nature of public safety and personal protection.
Well, I guess the thing that's frustrating to me is the media seems to be even worse over time at reporting on these things. I'll give you an example. Just a couple of weeks ago, NPR and public television came out with a survey that got a lot of attention, talking about, well, do people support gun rights or do they support public safety?
They're mutually exclusive, right? Yeah.
Right. I'd like to believe, even though I'd be classified as somebody who's, quote, a gun rights person, I never make those arguments when you've had me on the many times on your radio show. To me, what got me interested in this when I was teaching at the University of Chicago was what makes people safer, what saves lives. Mm-hmm. And so I think everybody on both sides of the debate want to make people safer. The question is, how do you do it? Do you make it so that individuals aren't allowed to protect themselves, that you ban gun ownership? Or do you go and make it so that people, when the police can't be there, have a chance to go and defend themselves? And if my research convinces me of anything, it's the people who are most likely victims of violent crime, and that overwhelmingly tends to be poor blacks who live in high-crime urban areas, and people who are relatively weaker physically, women and the elderly. It'd be great if the police were there all the time, but the police, even though they're extremely important, and my research indicates that they're probably the single most important factor for reducing crime, the police themselves realize that they virtually always arrive on the crime scene after the crimes occurred. And the question is, what should people do when they're having to confront a criminal by themselves? The media on so many different levels just perpetuates a lot of misinformation, and I think they actually help end up making people's lives at risk.
On the Hunter Biden charge with respect to filing a false application for a gun, Kodiak Black is a rapper. He pled guilty to providing false information on a federal form when purchasing multiple firearms, and he was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for his crime. Right. He's not ecstatic about the sentencing disparity in his case versus Hunter Biden's, which shouldn't surprise you. But what's your perspective on that charge and the the arrangement that the U.S. Attorney's Office is making, such that Hunter Biden doesn't have to pay the Kodiak Black price for it?
Well, I don't know. I think it's shocking. I mean, first of all, there's like 4 different felonies that Biden had just with regard to guns. You look at things like the tax charges. I mean, look, I was chief economist for the U.S. Sentencing Commission. I've seen a lot of people sentenced. As you mentioned earlier, I worked in the Department of Justice. One of the things I dealt with when I was at the Department of Justice was the NICS background check system and the rate at which people were prosecuted for those crimes. These are like the easiest crimes to go and prosecute people for. Did they sign the form to buy the guns, the so-called 4473? Did they provide false information on it? I mean, I can give you all sorts of cases where people, you would think, kind of accidentally violated the law on that, and the prosecutors went after them. This is something that's determined in the matter of weeks, maybe a month. Here we're at 5 years that the Department of Justice has been looking into these charges against him. They essentially ignore several of the felonies that he committed just with guns. I don't know about you, but at least I haven't forgotten to include what they say is over $1.5 million in income. They won't even tell you exactly how much money it is over and above that, but for somebody to kind of exclude that, you would think that that's not by accident that you misreporting that income.
And not reporting it at all. I mean, according to Fox News, he owes hundreds of thousands of dollars in back taxes. And he got off with a $25,000 fine. But if that was anybody else, they would go to jail. I mean, there's Hollywood actors, Wesley Snipes. There's others who, didn't pay their taxes or tax evasion, and they had to go to jail for it.
Look, just on the gun charges, on the lying on the background check system, that alone, you see cases brought left and right against those people. They're very easy cases to go and bring. It's not, what are you going to do for people who say that they weren't felons? What's the defense that they're going to have on that? They go to jail for things like that. And, mishandling the gun, the school property violation that they had there, all sorts of other crimes that they could have charged him with. Instead, they charged him with only one crime there, and they're not even going to punish him for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Yeah, maybe Kodiak Black should have been a blow artist rather than a rapper. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and stats at the DOJ's Office of Legal Policy, and author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John Lott, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
It's great to talk to you again. Thanks for being there.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Tell me why Relief Factor is so successful at lowering or eliminating pain. I'm often asked that question, and the owners of Relief Factor tell me they believe our bodies were designed to heal. That's right, designed to heal, and I agree with them. The doctors who formulated Relief Factor selected the 4 best ingredients, yes, 100%